I declare the motion carried and Ms. Kelly Block duly elected as the chair of the committee. I invite Ms. Block to take the chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. I certainly appreciate the confidence of this committee to serve as your chair. I want to welcome you all to the Public Accounts Committee, and I look forward to working with all of
Fine.
Mr. Lloyd Longfield.
And Madam Chair, I'd like to second that Mr. Blois's motion. And I'd like to, j'aimerais remercier aussi
I would like to thank my colleague for his confidence. That's very kind of him. But Mr. Longfield is in a much better position to be the second vice chair. Thank you. Mr. Berthold, would you like to withdraw your motion, or should we go to a vote? I didn't file a motion, Madam Clerk. For the nomination of Mr. Fergus. No, it was Mr. Blanchet. I'm sorry, Mr. Blanchet. Mr. Blanchet, would you like to proceed with the vote, or will you withdraw your motion? Well, from what I understand, Mr. Fergus is refusing the nomination, so I withdraw my motion. Okay.
Committee to adopt the motion that Mr. Longfield be named the first vice chair. Excellent. I declare the motion carried and Mr. Longfield is duly elected the first vice chair.
Thank you to my buddies. Now I have my speech. No, that's okay.
Excellent. I'll now proceed to the election of the second vice chair. Conformément à l'article 106.2.
In accordance with Standing Order 106.2, the second vice chair must be a member of the opposition party other than the official opposition. I am now prepared to receive motion for the second vice chair. I propose Mr. Blanchet-Jonca. Moved by Mr. Berthold that Mr. Blanchet-Jonca be elected as...
J'accepte avec plaisir, Madame Agrippière.
Are there any further motions? Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion?
Yep.
Excellent. Oui. I declare the motion carried and Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca duly elected second vice chair of the committee. So now, Madam President, if you would like to take the reins of the meeting.
Mr. Longfield?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we adopt the routine motions that we adopted last session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Longfield. I am wondering, do you want to adopt them in their entirety as one motion, or would you like to go through each motion as it is presented?
Well, I'd put it on the floor that we could do them all at the same time unless the committee wants to go through one by one, and I'm prepared to do that as well.
Yes, Mr. Green?
Yeah, I'd propose that we, in keeping with the practices of the other committees, go one by one so that we can make necessary adjustments as they come up.
All right, Mr. Longfield, you moved. Mr. Green is proposing a different process.
That's fine.
Okay. So we will move forward by consensus to go one by one.
Mr. Green just wants me to do some work. This is okay. We have some reading to do. Okay, the committee retain as needed and at the discretion of the chair the services of one or more analysts from the Library of Parliament to assist in its work.
All those in favor? Okay, that's carried.
That
Number two.
That the subcommittee on agenda and procedure be established and be composed of 5 members, namely the chair and 1 member from each recognized party, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
That the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive and publish evidence when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members from the opposition and 2 members from the government, and that in the case of previously scheduled meetings taking place outside of the parliamentary precinct, that the committee members in attendance be required to wait for 15 minutes following the designated start of the meeting before they may proceed to hear witnesses and receive evidence, regardless of whether opposition or government members are present.
Any discussion? Yes.
Just
Matthew?
wanted to make sure that it read that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition and 2 members of the government, just for clarity.
Yes,
Okay.
it does. All in favor? Carried.
Sorry, my screen is scrolling. I've got to stop it from doing that. That witnesses be given 10 minutes for their opening statement, and that at the discretion of the chair, during the questioning of witnesses, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows. Round 1, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, and the New Democratic Party. For the second and subsequent rounds, the order and time of questioning or for questioning be as follows. Conservative Party 5 minutes, Liberal Party 5 minutes, Conservative Party 5 minutes, Liberal Party 5 minutes, Bloc Québécois 2.5 minutes, New Democratic Party 2.5 minutes.
Point of order. The co-host has stopped my video, and I'm not sure why.
All right. There we go.
May you
Great.
also please put me on the speakers list for this? The timing was rather unfortunate. Stop my video.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Green?
Thank you. I'd like to move an amendment that witnesses be given 5 minutes for the opening statements, and that whenever possible, witnesses provide committee with the opening statements 72 hours in advance, and that at the discretion of the chair, during the questioning of the witnesses, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows. Round 1, Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, and New Democratic Party. And for the second and subsequent rounds, in the order and time question be as follows. 1, Conservative Party, 5 minutes. 2, Liberal Party, 5 minutes. 3, Bloc Québécois, 2.5 minutes. 4, New Democratic Party, 2.5 minutes. 5, Conservative Party, 5 minutes. And 6, Liberal Party, 5 minutes.
All right, we have a proposed amendment to this motion. Are there any other members who would like to speak to this amendment? Seeing none, we'll vote. Mr. Berthold? You are muted, Mr. Berthold.
Yeah, bonjour. Just to clarify, I will put my English, French. Bon. Juste pour clarifier.
Just to clarify, at the discretion of the chair, by consensus, let's say we receive the Auditor General, we can give him more time to do his presentation, if need be, for the good functioning of the committee.
Okay.
My
Good.
spirit and intent.
Thank you for
Perfect.
that clarification, Mr. Berthold. Any other discussion on the amendment?
Clerk, just a quick question. If you can just repeat the 72-hour portion, is that a, can you just repeat those words, MP Green, please?
Thank you. That witnesses provide the committee with their opening statement 72 hours in advance. And just to, if need be, for the operation of other committees, we found that by having these statements in advance, the need to, they can provide extended statements, but the need to then have more time was offset by that. So rather than have them come in at 10 minutes kind of off the cuff. And it also, quite frankly, ensures that we have the proper translations in advance for our French colleagues, or if they're Francophones, then English translations in advance.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Again, just to clarify, the amendment would change the length of a 10 minutes for opening statement to 5, that we would require their opening remarks 72 hours in advance, and that we would change the order of the questioners for the second round.
Madam,
Yes, Mr. Fergus?
if I could ask, would it be possible if I could ask you a question to Mr. Green? I'm supportive of this amendment. I just wanted to make sure that this 72-hour requirement was just, it was a best practices, but we wouldn't refuse somebody from giving an opening statement if they didn't meet that requirement.
No, I don't think that would be the spirit or intent, but we want to encourage people to come prepared and to provide translated documents for everybody.
Makes it a lot easier for us to follow the remarks as well.
Yeah, clerk, if I can, I think I'm going to just start raising my hand on the little in the participants thing. Thank you through you, clerk. Thank you, Mr. Green. Sometimes in committees, past practices, sometimes you don't invite witnesses till a day or two. So sometimes that's just the way the nature of the parliamentary calendar and committee schedule. So if that is the spirit, if possible to provide 72 hours of written correspondence, great. Not a requirement, but if possible, in that spirit, I'm supportive of the amendment through you, clerk, to MP Green.
Yes, Mr. Green.
Thank you. It may help some of my Liberal friends across the way to know that it was, in fact, the Liberals who put this initially in proc. And I know there was a lot of discussion and debate there, but we're just following that best practice that was laid out by our friends in the Liberal caucus.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. Any further discussion on this amendment? If not, we will vote on the amendment. All those in favor? That's carried. Now I believe we need to vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. The next section, that the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee only when the documents are available in both official languages, and that the witnesses be advised accordingly.
Any discussion? None. I see that everyone is in favor of that motion. That's carried.
That the clerk of the committee be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittees.
Will those meals be provided here in the riding?
If I could, Madam
Green?
Chair, it was also discussed. This was a conversation I think brought up, very sound critiques in COVID and the hybrid scenario that we're in. I think where we landed, or what made the most sense, was that people who are in town for meetings, if we are meeting in person, that we put that caveat. Otherwise, we wouldn't want to have food ordered for a room that is unattended for obvious reasons. But knowing how literal some of this stuff plays out once it's moved and carried, I just want to make sure that we're clear that this is for in-person meetings only upon the RVSP of members.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Green. Any other comments? All in favor? That's carried. Great.
That if requested, reasonable travel, accommodation, and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses not exceeding 2 representatives per organization, provided that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives be made at the discretion of the chair.
Any comments? All those in favor? That appears to be carried.
That unless otherwise ordered, each committee member be allowed to have one staff person at an in-camera meeting, and that one additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present.
All those in favor? Carried.
Madam Chair, I was raising my hand not
Oh,
to say
I'm
that.
sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. Mr. Berthold, please go ahead.
Okay, just a minute. Je voulais.
I just wanted to know how it will work with Zoom for our employees, for our staff. Can they connect directly to hear directly and immediately all we say in order to help us? Because on PowerView there's always a delay. How will it work for our assistants? I asked the question of the clerk. She said that there are phone numbers to be dialed, but to follow in directly, it's more difficult. So what is the will of the committee with regards to our staff?
Madam Clerk, would you be able to speak to the logistics of what Mr. Berthold has raised?
Certainly. It's my understanding that the member can have one member from their office present at the Zoom meeting in camera. And also that the telephone numbers we provide during regular meetings give them real-time access. So it's not like PowerView. They should be hearing us as we speak.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Your comments?
Just, Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Fergus.
Maybe I should turn to our staffers, but I always thought there was, even in camera when they're joining in by phone, that there's a slight delay, like a 7-second delay or something. I mean, I'm inventing the number, but it's more than just 1 or 2 seconds.
Just a point of order on Madam Chair.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm understanding that not everybody can hear the discussion that we're having right now, that the people that are remote are having trouble. So this is showing Mr. Berthold's point that sometimes when you're remote, the audio isn't working. So could the technicians check into that, please?
Could maybe am I okay? Sorry. Je veux parler en français, puis je suis comme.
I want to speak French and I'm confused with the channels. Why don't we authorize our assistant to participate in the meeting on the Zoom with a turned off camera? We would be certain that they are there, that they hear the discussion, and that they can give us advice. The order might be that they be on the Zoom with their cameras off. The clerk and the analyst will be there. I think that would be a good way to settle the issue, to have our assistants. In person, we know who's there. Over the phone, we cannot see who's there, who's participating in the meeting.
Would you like me to respond?
Yes.
Okay. Malheureusement, j'ai pas une réponse.
Unfortunately, I don't have an answer. I will confirm later on. I know that at the beginning with this new format of meeting, we didn't have such a big capacity to have a good sound. If there were too many people, I think things have improved now, but I don't have a direct answer for that now. I will confirm and come back to the committee. Thank you.
Sorry.
J'aimerais soulever aussi un deuxième point à
I would like to raise a second issue. Things are working well for my staff. The interpreter apologizes, but Mr. Fergus's microphone is not working well. It's not loud enough.
Or there, you're not coming through very clearly.
Pardonnez-moi, Madame la Présidente, est-ce que ça c'est mieux pour les
Yes.
interprètes? D'accord. J'aimerais juste dire.
I would like to say that people who participate in the leader's office in the House are not just merely on one meeting on a Zoom. They are not for one committee. They are attending 2 or 3 meetings, depending on the schedule of the day. It's not possible to follow debates if you can only have one Zoom functioning at a time. Whereas if you're on the phone, you can follow many meetings at the same time. Maybe we can bring changes to our Zoom system so that we can be on many Zooms at the same time. But at this point, I don't think it's technically possible. But Mr. Fergus, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not talking about the WIP employees, but our own employees, our staff, who have to help us in the meetings. They have to be with us at the same time, connected at the same time as us, otherwise they cannot help us do our work as if we were in a presence meeting. I understand that the clerk will be looking at the capacity of the system to welcome our staff, but they are there. We know that they are there. We want to know that they participate. I'm quite willing to wait for the answer of the clerk. Madam Chair.
Longfield, you had raised your hand earlier. Do you have any comments to make?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I think it's a great suggestion that Mr. Berthold brings forward, that if we were all on the same technology, that would take one of the variables out of it. So if it's at all possible, it would be great to be able to accommodate that.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Madam Clerk?
Madame la Présidente, j'avais levé la main également.
Madam Chair, I rose my hand before.
My apologies, Mr. Blanchette. My apologies, Madam Clerk. Mr. Blanchette?
Oui, simplement quelques
A few information from my colleagues. Normally, the chief clerk should be getting back to us as to the presence of our staff on a Zoom meeting. Madam Clerk might be able to confirm this for us. Thank you, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca. This is precisely what I was going to say, and I will confirm with the direction of the committees. With the management of committees, sorry.
Are we ready to adopt this motion? Okay, all those in favor? Carried.
Okay, that one copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultation by members of the committee or by their staff.
Any comments? Seeing none. All in favor? Carried.
That a 48 hours notice interpreted as 2 nights shall be required for any substantive motion to be considered by the committee, unless the substantive motion relates directly to business then under consideration, provided that 1, the notice be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. on Monday to Friday. That 2, the motion be distributed to members in both official languages by the clerk on the same day the said notice was transmitted if it was received no later than the deadline hour. And that 3, notices be received after notices received after the deadline hour or on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day, and that when the committee is traveling on official business, no substantive motions may be moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried.
That in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, A, the clerk of the committee shall, upon the committee receiving such an order of reference, write to each member who is not a member of a caucus represented on the committee to invite those members to file with the clerk of the committee in both official languages any amendments to the bill which is subject of the said order which they would suggest that the committee consider. B, that suggested amendments be filed pursuant to paragraph A at least 48 hours prior to the start of the clause-by-clause consideration of the bill to which the amendments relate shall be deemed to be proposed during the said consideration, provided that the committee may, by motion, vary this deadline in respect of a given bill, and that C, during the clause-by-clause consideration of a bill, the chair shall allow a member who filed suggested amendments pursuant to paragraph A an opportunity to make a brief presentation in support of them.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried.
That the committee chair and staff be authorized to review government responses to recommendations made by the committee during the 43rd Parliament, acknowledge by letter on the committee's behalf receipt of the government's responses where they respond clearly and completely to recommendations or request further information or clarification as required, that monitor the implementation of government commitments made in response to committee recommendations and request further information as required, and report to the committee on these activities in a timely fashion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried.
Okay, that all organizations that have been subject to a performance audit or a special examination by the Office of the Auditor General of Canada provide a detailed action plan to address the audit recommendations which have been agreed to, including specific actions, timelines for their completion and responsible individuals to the committee and the Office of the Auditor General of Canada within 6 months of the audit being tabled in the House of Commons.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried.
That organizations that are invited to appear before the committee to discuss the findings of an audit should provide an action plan to the committee no later than 48 hours prior to the hearing.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried.
That action plans and progress reports received by the committee be published on the committee's website.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried.
That the clerk of the committee be authorized to purchase an appropriate gift to be presented to visiting delegations and that the chair report it to the committee.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. All right, I just want to apologize. I received some very good instructions from our clerk in terms of providing instruction for how we would function virtually, and I neglected to look at my email after I was elected chair, so I will make sure to do that at the beginning of the next meeting. So I want to then move us to other business, and I see that there are no other routine motions. Yes?
My apologies, Madam Chair. It's not as a routine motion, but I do have a motion that would reintroduce inviting back past chairs of this committee to present, because I believe that's where we left off prior to COVID, because it wasn't prorogation. We didn't meet through prorogation.
All right. So that, are you putting that motion on notice, or are you hoping that this committee
it's pertaining to the business, in my opinion, just to kind of revisit those past motions and re-invite the past chairs as a orientation for new members to this committee in terms of how this processes and procedures of public accounts go, because it is a very specific, there's a high specificity to how this particular committee goes.
So do I, Madam Clerk, do I need unanimous consent to proceed with a motion
No.
at this time?
No, if Mr. Green has moved a motion and the committee may consider it.
All right. Mr. Green, do you have any further comments? If not, I'll open it up for anyone else.
I think it's pretty self-evident. Most of the chairs are coming from the various parties. I know my predecessor, Mr. David Christofferson, had decades of experience in this committee, and I think that we would all benefit from hearing from the past wisdom of these committee chairs, because it is a very unique committee that we're on, one that I think supersedes any kind of partisanship, and we want to make sure that we're having the best information that we can in that transfer. So I was looking forward to it prior to COVID. Quite frankly, we didn't get it, and then we've had so much time away. So I look forward to getting back to that business.
Any other discussion? Yes, Mr. Longfield.
Thanks. I'm also using my hand in the participant section. I think Mr. Berthold might have been ahead of me. I think his hand was up first.
Okay, thank you.
I have no problem with this motion. I think that could help us. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Longfield.
Yeah, first of all, I'd also like to just comment on Dean Allison was a really good chair to have in the short period that I interacted with him, and he does have a lot to bring back to us in terms of institutional knowledge. I wonder whether part of this motion we could also talk about orientation in general, that the orientation could include a previous chair, or would include a previous chair coming forward to discuss the operation of the committee. But we also had some very good orientation from the clerk, through the clerk's office, that we have a lot of new members on the committee, and I found it excellent. And that if we were able to have another orientation session showing us what the committee does when it's on a good day, and what the committee, what kind of challenges we might have, and how to handle those challenges going forward in a nonpartisan way. So if it's okay to say we have an orientation session, or that part of the motion is we bring back the previous chair and we have orientation by the department.
Mr. Green, is that a friendly amendment to, do you see that as a friendly amendment to your motion?
Well, I know that Mr. Allison was elected newly in the very short period of time that we met, but if my memory serves me correct, it was actually Mr. Kevin Sorensen and Sean Murphy, Liberal and Conservative past chairs, who had, I think, maybe a little bit more time in the chair. Mr. Allison was a very short-lived chair on this committee. And just for the record, I believe it's the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation that Mr. Longfield is referencing in our initial orientation, which I also found to be an incredibly great start to this, and I would welcome that to be part of the overall resumption of business that we were doing on this committee. So Mr. Christofferson, Mr. Sorensen, and Mr. Murphy would be the people that would be in keeping with the past motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. I now have Mr. Sobera.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, through you to MP Green. Can you read the motion over from the beginning, or the motion that you wish to present, please?
I move that we re-invite the past chairs of the Public Accounts Committee, including Mr. Christofferson, Mr. Kevin Sorensen, and Mr. Sean Murphy, and that we re-invite the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation to provide an orientation for this committee for the good and welfare of all members, including the new ones.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and Chair through you to Mr. Green. P. Green, I'm in full support of that motion, along incorporating the comments that our Vice Chair on our side made and towards the orientation session. I think that's a constructive motion to put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now go to Mr. Fergus.
Madam Chair, I was going to make a similar motion to Mr. Longfield. I really appreciate Mr. Green's motion. To tell you the truth, I really could use a second time through that orientation by Canadian Association. I'm hoping that it will stick a little bit more in my head, because there was a lot of information that they had provided us. And I say this for the new members that these orientation sessions were fabulous. And given the history of this committee and how throughout, I don't know how many parliaments, it has presented unanimous reports. There have been no dissenting reports out of this committee for I think for a long time. I think that's because the committee really had the benefit of that kind of training, and we really did take on our fiduciary responsibilities as members of parliament, not as political representatives, but really as members of parliament, to making sure that this committee does continue to do great work. So I look forward to voting in favor of this motion and getting that training back.
Thank you very much. Then I have Mr. Berthold, then Mr. Longfield, and then Mr. Weber. Mr. Berthold.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to add Mr. Green Allison to the names of the former chairs. We cannot forget one chair because the parliament did not sit for long. He was one of the chairs of the committee. It's up to him to decide whether he thinks it's important for him to appear before us and share his experience. I think it will be lack of respect if we fail to invite Mr. Allison, who was also a chair of the committee.
Mr. Longfield.
Mr. Berthold and I have worked together and often finish each other's sentences, which we should both be afraid of. I think that having Mr. Allison come back would be very beneficial. I'd also like to suggest that we do this as a first order of business, that we move this even into the next meeting if possible. So to put a timeline to the motion, if we could do that, that would be, then I'd 100% support the motion with Mr. Allison's addition and with as the first order of business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Longfield. Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wanting to make sure that you all can hear me. We had difficulty in the pre-testing of my microphone, so I assume you can hear me fine. Great, thumbs are up. Absolutely support the motion with the additions of Allison and such. I, as a new member of this committee, very much look forward to an orientation. I did serve I think close to 8 long years on the Public Accounts Committee in the province of Alberta. So I'm curious to know how the operations here work, and if there's any differences, which I'm sure there are. I just look forward to learning how you guys run the operation here. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Are there any other comments? Mr. Fergus?
Juste une autre commentaire, Madame Bloch.
Another comment? I hope it falls in line with what Mr. Green proposed when he tabled his amended proposal. Not only we invite the association, but all the former chairs of the committee. But could we also include the Auditor General and the Controller General in that motion? That was part of what was discussed in the previous orientation sessions. I think it would be a good idea to do that once again, if possible.
Mr. Green?
I think he's quite right, and I'm unclear about the timing in terms. I know the presentation was fairly fulsome. It may need to be broken up into 2 days, but that is right in keeping with the spirit of our past business, if I recall. Thank you for the intervention, Mr. Fergus. Professor Fergus, looking very professorial. For the record, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Mr. Berthold? Oh. Mr. Berthold, you are muted.
Yeah. Merci.
Lots of buttons we need to press to speak into French and then switch back to English. Concerning the Auditor General and the Controller General, a lot of time has gone by since we met, and afterwards I'll be proposing a motion for the Auditor General to come from next week to present the state of affairs, so we know what the reports are, what the deadlines are, what happened since he was appointed in June. I think it's important for us to meet him quickly, and so we can plan what we have to do in the months ahead. I agree with Mr. Green's motion that we have an orientation session and that we also invite the former chairs, the association. Let's not forget, we don't want to spend the next 6 sessions on training though. So we need to know where to draw the line. A lot has to do with our personal responsibility to find information. So I want to support the first draft of Mr. Green's motion, invite the past chairs, and then I support the training that was organized by the Foundation on Audits. As for the Auditor General and the Controller General, we already have questions for them. And I would like to exclude that from the motion if Mr. Green agrees. And then I'll be presenting a second motion asking that the new Auditor General come and speak to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berthold. I believe that we can entertain that motion, or you can at least give us notice of that motion to invite the Auditor General and the Controller. I did see, and that would be something that we will deal with after Mr. Green's motion. I did see Mr. Lawrence's hand up. Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, just briefly, just supporting that we go forward with Deputy Green's motion, just as a singular, and then we can look at Mr. Berthold's motion with respect to the Auditor General.
All right. Is everybody clear on what it is we are voting on?
Well, I would love to hear from Mr. Green. I think Madam Chair, I think he had accepted two friendly amendments to his motion, but I don't know if it was just 1 or 2, and perhaps Mr. Green could clarify that. And just a point of information, and perhaps your IT people can make this clear. Pour mon ami Luc, moi je pense, Luc, si tu as la dernière version.
What was when you have the last version of Zoom, you don't have to indicate, you don't have to switch when you're speaking French or English. You simply go with the sound from the floor and it's going to work. I'm talking about the latest version of Zoom. The one with the one in May, we couldn't do that. But with the new Zoom version, I think it's possible to do that. You just go with the flow. You could work with the guys from the technical team, and they'll help you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fergus, for that clarification. So, Mr. Green, Mr. Fergus has asked for clarification to the, I believe, 2 friendly amendments that were made, and we've now had one of our members suggest that we separate out the second friendly amendment into a separate motion that he'd be willing to make.
Yes, if I recall, and notwithstanding there's no such thing as friendly amendments, as I'm sure the clerk would remind us, but if I recall, the collaborative spirit of this conversation has landed us in a place where in my motion, we are inviting back the past chairs, inclusive of Mr. Allison, the Mr. Christofferson, Mr. Sorensen, and Mr. Murphy, and that we are also going to invite back the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation, as we had done in an orientation in the previous meetings, full stop. And then I'll leave the rest to my good friend, Mr. Berthold.
Are we ready for the question? All those in favor? Carried. Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I sent the motion to the clerk earlier this morning. Maybe she'll be sending us a copy, but I'll read it again. It's very simple. In accordance with 102, the committee is inviting the Auditor General of Canada to speak to us during the meeting of the 22nd of October. That's so next week. Present the situation of the audit underway, what is planned for the publication of the next report. During that meeting, the first part should be in camera, the second part public, and then the public meeting, part of the meeting, should be televised.
Mr. Longfield.
Monsieur Longfield.
Thanks. I had an email coming in, so I couldn't raise my hand on the right-hand part of my screen. Technology. I think if we did the training first, then we would know how to deal with Auditor General questions to get the process of how we function as a committee as a first order of business. I definitely think we need to, I agree, we need to get the Auditor General in, and especially in his new role. I know that the clock is ticking because in November we're going to have public accounts coming at us, and there's going to be a fairly heavy workload thrown at us in November, I'm guessing. I would say let's try and get our committee processes and procedures and reflections done first, and then get the Auditor General in once we've had our training on how to function as a committee.
Any other, Mr. Fergus?
In spite of what my friend Mr. Green has said, I think this would be considered a friendly motion, a friendly amendment to what Mr. Berthold said. I agree with him that we need to have the Auditor General talk about audits as soon as possible. Let me add, the first time these people come, there's training, and then the next time, without any delay, we can then invite the witnesses to come present the state of the public accounts and the audit reports. I don't remember, Mr. Berthold, whether you were a member of the committee before the prorogation. We received training, and we did that during one entire session. It was very detailed. We were taught how to read statements, the right questions to ask, the questions to avoid. I found that training session very useful. I see the analysts raising their hand. Maybe they could give us an update on that. I agree with your position, Mr. Berthold. This is not delay tactics. I just want us to do the training first, and then we can move on to asking questions later.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Would turn it over to Mr. Now, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Thekta? You are muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to everybody. J'aimerais vous dire, mon nom est...
I'm called Dylan, and with Andre, I'm one of the two analysts working on the committee. Maybe to be able to do all we need, invite people working on public accounts and the Auditor General. When we do public accounts, when we work on a study on public reports.
I think we're having trouble, both the French and the English at the same time, talking over one another.
I'll speak in English just for technical, maybe right now. When we have a meeting of the public accounts, it has been the practice in recent years to have it divided into two 1-hour sessions. And the first hour is with in addition to staff from the OAG who provide an audit opinion of the public accounts, we also include the people at the Office of the Controller General who help prepare them. So we have one in-camera session, and then we have one public session in which we study the public accounts and ask questions and etc. So one way perhaps in which to accommodate the volonté of the committee would be to have the session with the past chairs and the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation, and if possible, the Vérificatrice Générale, the Auditor General of Canada, Ms. Hogan. And then when we study the public accounts in the next meeting, it can be assured that both the OAG as well as the staff, including the Comptroller General, will be there for the first half of the in-camera session. I wanted to help maybe just provide some background for the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dylan. I see Mr. Green.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I know that in short order, I know Mr. Longfield referenced this, it's likely we're going to get to a point where we're going to be meeting twice a week based on the workload. And so just as a thought for the committee, given that we haven't met for quite some time now, if it makes sense, or if it is both considered urgent and important, that perhaps in the week that we do our orientation, we can book a second meeting to deal with the business at hand, in the event that it might take us longer than we might have in one sitting to get it all done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. I am going to go to Madam Clerk because I know they're working with the schedule for committees and the House's ability or capacity to hold a certain number of meetings. So Madam Clerk, would you speak to Mr. Green's suggestion?
I was informed this morning that the committees will be meeting once a week for the next 2 weeks, and that the Public Accounts Committee is scheduled to meet on Thursday morning from 11 to 1, both next week and the following week. So we would only have one meeting a week for those 2 weeks. And if you wanted to have an orientation session the first week, and then a session with the Auditor General's office second week, that's something the committee could do.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Berthold.
Okay. Excusez-moi, fallait que je...
I had to press the right buttons once again. I don't have a problem with the orientation session. So in the motion, instead of talking about Thursday, the 22nd of October, we could say the 22nd or the next week or the 29th, so that we allow the clerk to organize meetings if people are not available next week. I think that for the Auditor General, if ever we are not able to have the training session next week, we may be able to put questions to the Auditor General, and then we can have the training session later on. But of course, we may prefer to have the orientation session next week. But we give the clerk some latitude to organize meetings just in case some former chairs are not available next week. So we are just giving her some discretion. So with my motion, if everyone agrees, I would say that during one meeting of the 22nd of October or the 29th of October. That way, it's up to the clerk, depending on availabilities, to organize the meetings.
Any other comments to be made? If not, I will assume that we are ready for the question. All those in favor of Mr. Berthold's motion with the change? That's carried. Thank you very much. Is there any other future business that the committee wishes to discuss at this time? If not, then I guess I would need the consent of the committee to adjourn the meeting. Do I have your consent to adjourn? Yes?
Great job, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
Bravo,
The meeting.
Kelly.
Thank you. Then the meeting is adjourned, and I wish you all a great day and a wonderful weekend.
Likewise, Chair. Everyone have a great afternoon. Awesome.
Yeah, cheers.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I was trying to press the unmute button.
Yeah.
So is it just us? Angela, is it just us?
Yeah, but we have to get off this channel and we can do a team meeting, okay?